Everybody thinks Martin was just another victim. An old man chained to a wall. A man infected by something evil. A man waiting to die. That's what the show wanted you to believe. But if you go back and watch his scenes carefully, something starts to feel wrong. The way he talks. The things he knows. The timing of everything. None of it feels random. Because Martin was never just a prisoner. And what if I told you From has already revealed exactly who Martin is, and they did it years ago? Not through a big twist. Not through a hidden flashback. But through one simple pattern the show keeps repeating over and over again. A pattern most people missed. And once you see it, Martin's entire story changes. His dungeon changes. The worms change. Even Boyd changes. Because Martin may not be some random man trapped in the town. He may be something far more terrifying. He may be proof of what happens when the town finally breaks you. And if that's true, then Boyd's future may have already been shown to us. Right there in Season 2. Let's break this down. The first thing we need to understand is this. From never introduces important characters by accident. Every person in this town has a purpose. Victor.
Tabitha. Jade.
Christopher. Miranda. Even the boy in white. The show keeps teaching us the same lesson. Every major player exists inside a cycle. And that cycle repeats. Different faces. Same roles. That is the key to understanding Martin. When Boyd first enters the dungeon in Season 2, everything about the scene feels strange. Not scary. Strange. He falls into that well after going through the faraway tree. Already, that tells us something important. The faraway trees are not random. They move people where the town wants them to go. Victor has told us that before. Sometimes the trees help. Sometimes they trap. But they always have intention. So Boyd landing in that well was not an accident. The town sent him there. That alone changes everything. Because if the town wanted Boyd there, then Martin was waiting for him. And when Boyd hears Martin's voice, Martin asks him something very strange. Are you real?
Think about that.
Not who are you? Not help me. Not get me out. He asks, are you real? That is not the question of a desperate prisoner. That is the question of someone who has seen things before. Things that looked real. Things that weren't. Echoes. Visions. Story walkers. People from different timelines. By asking Boyd that question, Martin tells us something huge. He has been in contact with the town's deeper systems for a very long time. Long enough to understand that reality in From is unstable. Long enough to know not every visitor is physically there. And that means Boyd was not the first person Martin had seen. He was waiting, watching,
testing.
That changes Martin from victim to participant. Then comes the next big clue. Martin knows Abby. This is one of the most important moments in the entire series, and almost nobody talks about it enough. Abby was Boyd's wife. She believed the town was a dream. She believed everyone had to die to wake up. That was personal, private, something Boyd carried like trauma. And Martin brings her up with perfect timing. Right when Boyd is vulnerable. Right when the music box is about to stop. Right when fear is highest. That is not random information. That is emotional precision. Martin knew exactly where to hit Boyd. And here's the bigger question. How? The monsters couldn't have told him. The townspeople didn't know. Abby was dead. So where did Martin learn that? There are only two possible answers. Either Martin has access to Boyd's memories, or Martin exists in the same network of knowledge the town itself uses. And if that's true, Martin is much closer to the source than we ever thought. But then there's the biggest clue of all, the marine tattoo. This detail is easy to ignore. But From does not waste symbols. Boyd sees the tattoo and immediately connects to Martin.
Two military men.
Two protectors. Two men defined by duty. That matters. Because this show loves repeating archetypes. Miranda becomes Tabitha. Christopher becomes Jade. The same function returns in new forms. So, what if Martin is Boyd's predecessor? Not literally Boyd, but the person who carried Boyd's role before him. The protector. The leader. The one responsible for holding everyone together. Suddenly Martin makes perfect sense. Why he's there. Why he's alive.
Why he's chained.
Why he's waiting. Because Martin isn't the mystery. Martin is the outcome. He is what happens when the protector fails to escape the cycle. And if that's true, Boyd isn't walking his own path. He's walking Martin's. And the dungeon wasn't showing Boyd a stranger. It was showing him his future. And once you realize that the blood transfer becomes much darker than we thought. Because the blood was never just blood. That is the lie the show wanted us to accept. When Martin cuts his arm and presses it against Boyd, everybody focused on the worms. The infection. The curse. The weapon Boyd later uses against Smiley. But what if the worms were never the point? What if they were only the delivery system? Think about Martin's final words. My blood is your blood now. That line is bigger than people realize. In almost every mythology, blood transfer means inheritance. It means succession. It means passing responsibility, passing identity, passing burden. And in From, burden matters more than anything. Every character carries one. Victor carries memory. Tabitha carries the mission. Jade carries the obsession. And Boyd carries the responsibility. But what if Boyd didn't always carry it? What if Martin did first? Look at Martin's condition. He's been chained there for years, maybe decades. And yet he's still alive. That alone makes no sense. No food. No water. No way out. No normal human survives that. But Martin does.
Why?
The answer is terrifying. Because the town needed him alive. Not to torture him. To preserve him. There's a difference. When we later see other people trapped by the music box entity, they suffer differently. They scream. They panic. They break. But Martin? Martin is calm. Focused. Clear. He speaks like a man who understands exactly what is happening. That's important. It tells us Martin wasn't confused. He knew the rules. He knew Boyd would come. And he knew what had to happen next. That means his survival was not random. It was maintenance. The town was keeping him functional until the handoff was complete. And once Boyd takes the blood, Martin dies immediately. That timing matters. The second his purpose is fulfilled, his life ends. That means the town was never keeping Martin alive for Martin. It was keeping him alive for Boyd. That changes everything. Because it means Martin's existence was part of a chain, a system, one protector passing the burden to the next. And then there's Julie. This is where things get even crazier. Season 3 gave us one of the biggest hidden answers in the whole show. Julie enters the ruins and suddenly sees the dungeon again. Not as ruins. As it was.
Alive.
Intact. And Martin is there. He sees her. He knows her. He says her name.
How?
Julie had never met him. At least not yet. But Martin already knew her. And then he tells her to throw the rope. That's the same rope Boyd used in Season 2. Which means the rope scene wasn't happening in a straight timeline. It was a loop. A closed loop. Martin was guiding Julie in one timeline to save Boyd in another. That means Martin understands time in a way normal people in From do not. He sees the connections. The loops. The cycle. That makes him one of the only characters in the entire show with awareness of the structure. Not just the town. The structure itself. That puts him on the same level as the boy in white. Maybe even higher. Because unlike the boy in white, Martin bleeds. Martin suffers. Martin waits. He is human.
Or at least he was.
And that may be the scariest part. Because if a normal human can become that, then Boyd can too. Now look at Boyd's journey after the blood transfer. What happens? Everything gets worse. Not better. He kills Smiley. For a moment, it feels like victory.
But it isn't.
Because Smiley comes back. That tells us something brutal. The town allows temporary victories. Never permanent ones. It lets hope exist only so it can crush it. And Boyd is the perfect target for that. Because Boyd's greatest strength is hope. That's why the town chose him. Not because he's strong. Because he keeps fighting. And Martin was the same. A Marine. A protector. A man who would sacrifice himself for everyone else. The same type. The same function. That's the pattern. And patterns are everything in From. The town doesn't repeat people. It repeats purpose. That's why Tabitha mirrors Miranda. That's why Jade mirrors Christopher. And Boyd mirrors Martin. Not by coincidence. By design. The town keeps selecting the same kind of people. People who cannot walk away. People who feel responsible. People who will stay and suffer if it means saving someone else. Martin stayed. Boyd stayed. And now Boyd is starting to crack. That's the real horror. Not the monsters. Not the worms. The transformation. Because Martin may be showing us what happens when the Protector reaches the end. Not death. Something worse. Acceptance. And Boyd is getting dangerously close to that point. Because in Season 4, Boyd is not the same man anymore. He's counting bullets. He's losing faith. He's becoming colder. More desperate. More dangerous. Exactly like a man who has been carrying too much for too long. Exactly like Martin. And if this theory is right, then Boyd isn't just following Martin's path. He's reaching Martin's destination. And that means the dungeon was never a prison. It was a waiting room. A place where the Protector waits until the next one arrives. And that raises one horrifying question. If Martin passed the role to Boyd, who was supposed to take it from Boyd? That is the question the show refuses to answer directly. Because the moment you ask it, everything about From starts to collapse into one uncomfortable truth. This town doesn't just trap people. It replaces them. Again and again. And every replacement looks like survival until you realize it's actually continuation. Martin was not an isolated case. He was part of a system that stretches far beyond one dungeon, one timeline, or one victim. And Boyd is not outside that system. He is inside it. Deep inside it. The blood transfer didn't just infect Boyd's body. It inserted him into something older than him. Something already in motion before he ever arrived. That's why nothing about Boyd's journey feels like progress. It feels like escalation. Every season pushes him further into roles he never asked for. Leader. Protector.
Judge.
Executioner. And now something even darker is forming beneath all of that. Fatigue. Isolation. Breakdown. Not sudden. Not dramatic. Slow. Systematic. Like something being worn down on purpose. And that is exactly how Martin ended. Not in chaos, but in clarity right before collapse. Martin didn't scream. He didn't break down. He stayed composed until the very end. Because he understood something Boyd is only starting to understand now. There is no escape route out of the role. Only transfer. That's the cycle. And From has been showing it in different disguises since the beginning. Victor didn't become what he is by choice. He became it by surviving too long. Jade didn't become obsessed randomly. He was pulled into the same pattern Christopher once lived through. Tabitha didn't wake up inside the mystery by accident. She stepped into a repeating design that already had her shape prepared. So when we look at Martin, we are not looking at a standalone mystery. We're looking at a template. A blueprint of what happens when the town finishes shaping someone into function instead of identity. At that point, the person stops being a person. They become a role that still speaks, that still moves, that still waits. Martin waiting in that dungeon is not about punishment. It is about positioning. He is placed there like a marker in time, a signal that says, the previous holder has reached the end. Now the next one must arrive. And Boyd arrives exactly as required. Not earlier. Not later. At the exact moment the system needs him. That precision is not coincidence. It is design. And the most disturbing part is that Boyd doesn't recognize it even as it happens. He thinks he is making choices. He thinks he is resisting. But every major turning point in his story is triggered by something outside him. A voice. A rope. A warning.
A death.
A transfer. That's not freedom. That's guided movement. And Martin understands that better than anyone. That's why his questions feel strange. That's why his calm feels unnatural. He is not confused about the town. He is resigned to it. Because he has already lived through the realization Boyd is still approaching. That realization is simple. There is no ending inside From. Only succession. And succession always requires someone to lose themselves first. Martin lost himself before Boyd ever arrived. Not physically. Functionally. He stopped being Martin and became the container for what needed to be passed forward. That is why his death feels timed. Because it is. The moment Boyd receives what he carries, Martin is no longer needed. And the system removes him like an expired piece in a machine.
Quietly.
Completely. Without ceremony. But the horror does not end there. Because once Boyd becomes the holder of this role, the pattern does not stop. It only restarts. The same pressure that shaped Martin will begin shaping Boyd. The same isolation. The same responsibility. The same impossible decisions. The same slow erosion of certainty. And that is already happening. Boyd is no longer the stable center he once was. He is reacting instead of leading. He is questioning instead of directing. He is breaking down in moments where others still expect strength. That shift is important. Because in this town, weakening is not just emotional. It is structural. It signals that the system is preparing the next adjustment. And every adjustment in from has one direction. Forward. Never back. So if Martin was the previous version of Boyd, then Boyd is not being worn by him. He is being replaced through him. And the most unsettling implication of all is this. Martin may not have been trying to save Boyd. He may have been finishing himself through Boyd. Passing on not just power, not just infection, but completion. Because in a place like this, survival is never the goal. Continuation is. And Boyd is now part of that continuation whether he understands it or not. Which means the real question was never who Martin is. The real question is what Martin becomes once he is no longer needed. And if that answer is true, then Boyd already knows how his own story ends. He just hasn't accepted it yet.